All right, you know what we're talking about today? Do I have to say the person's name every time, T? Do
Yeah,
I
it'd be
always
great.
have to say who it is?
I'm confused.
Oh,
no one knows,
you don't
and
know,
I certainly don't.
You show up, you don't know if you're Nate?
No, dude, it's all confusing.
What? So we're actually going to today, take a look at 5 heroes that we want to see get their own video game, with a little caveat, that is that some of them have had a game, but it's bad. So if they have had a game and it's either bad or mediocre, or have not had a game, those heroes are eligible for this list for sure. And I do want to say before we start that you should check out the new Let's Play channel where T and I are playing through a bunch of stuff. We're actually starting Shadow of the Colossus soon. We've been playing through Resident Evil 1 HD. Nate and I are playing through Kingdom Hearts. So hey, be sure to check that out. The link is in the description below, and we talk better over there, we swear. So the first one we want to start with is actually Iron Man. Now, I know I just made a video about why Iron Man should be getting a game, why it's not hard to make. We talked about that, and he is getting a VR experience, but let's be honest, VR experiences are not the same as a full-fledged game yet, for the most part. We're not at the point of like Sword Art Online, you know, where you like put on like some kind of like helmet on your head and you're just in the game, like
Right.
Physically your brain is there. We're not like at Ready Player One at all.
Correct.
It's fairly limited technology still, both by the space that someone has in their house, by the tech itself and what it can do. It's all shaky still. I mean, this is very different than like, say, a full Insomniac Spider-Man game.
Correct.
Compared to a VR experience.
Yes, it's totally different. And not to say that VR technology isn't impressive.
No,
there are some
it is.
amazing games. Even if you play super short, but the Batman Arkham VR game is a blast, actually.
It's
super short, not a whole
But again,
lot.
it's an experience. It's very
Yes.
different than like playing Batman Arkham Knight,
That's
for
a
example.
good word for it. It's an experience. And it's a great experience.
Beat Saber's another one like that, where it's like music. And, yeah, it's impressive technology, but that's not what we're looking for, really. We want a fully fledged, like fully fleshed out game where you as Tony Stark take control of multiple Iron Man suits over the course of the game. We had the idea, I'm sure someone else has come up with it at some point in the forums or something, of building your own suits, because that's a big part of the Tony Stark character. I don't know, there's a lot there you could do.
That'd be amazing. And to go out and actually have like a 20-hour story and be able to explore the world as Tony Stark, I think that's something that is long overdue, especially with the growth of the popularity of the character due to the MCU. So it's definitely something that's long overdue, and I think it would be a really, really popular experience that people would enjoy.
Oh, for sure. I don't know who wouldn't buy that's into superheroes at least.
Yes, obviously it'd be amazing if RDJ showed up and voiced this thing.
Yeah, but I don't know.
There's no way it happens.
The salary he commands, I don't know.
There's
there'd
the
be
entire
any
game
point.
budget. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
yeah, we'd
cool.
love to see that.
Yes.
The next one was your idea, but I agree with it.
Yes. The next one is Green Arrow. And for me, and I've talked about it a few times on the channel, for me, I really, really enjoyed Arrow for a few seasons. Started to taper out later on, and I've talked about that a few times.
Every time you bring this up, by the way, there's always these comments where it's like, well, season 3 was bad, but 4 and 5 were amazing. And like, you're missing out on 7. And it's like, have you watched those?
There are, and I will say there are some episodes in those seasons that are fun. I think I got to season 6 is where I stopped, and there was some stuff that I enjoyed in between. But for as far as like a whole season, I really enjoyed 2, half of 3, but not to get
I started hating that show when it was the episode where it's like, hey, I don't mind guns, and then like a gun shows up and Oliver Queen's like, you're right, they're bad.
They're really bad.
I was like, oh my gosh, this is terrible writing. Like, it became a very preachy show in terms of what it wanted to be. We do not want the game to be that. I mean, Green Arrow has always been a very like left-leaning character. It's totally fine to show that in his character.
Sure, I don't mind
in the comics, he's always been that. But there's a very big difference between intelligently written political commentary like Watchmen and unintelligent political garbage like the Arrowverse fell into.
That's a great point.
So I think they need to do that if they're going to have any kind of messaging behind this character, because he has always had a message.
Yeah.
That's important to say.
Well, and the Arrow that comes to mind that I really like is like from the Justice League show. There are some great episodes with him where it's just, and even in Injustice, he's got some great lines, some great action scenes there, just cutscenes, obviously. But then even in like Dark Knight Returns, when he's got one arm, and that older Arrow would be great too. So there's a lot of different versions of Oliver Queen that would be
He's
super
so
interesting.
charming if he's done well.
Yes, he's super charming. He's actually got some really fun like sidekicks as well, like Roy Harper, and then in the show even Thea Queen. So there's
and there's not to cut you off, but there's interesting things you can do with those sidekicks, because eventually in the comics Roy Harper fell hard into like alcoholism and stuff like that. He had a pretty depressing storyline as like Red Arrow and Arsenal and stuff, and you could very easily like play off of that in an Arrow universe. So like how Arkham kind of went into that angle of like, hey, Dick Grayson left, he became Nightwing, now he's kind of back. Hey, Tim Drake's Robin, but, you know, Jason died, basically, or that's what they think. You know, like, there's some tragedy to those connected characters, even with Barbara. You could easily play into that with a character like Roy Harper in terms of the story.
Oh, absolutely. Well, and even villain-wise, too, you can tap into some of even Batman's villains, like they did in the Arrow show. Yeah. Deathstroke shows up. Ra's al Ghul shows up. There was others, like, I didn't mind Damien Dark. Malcolm Merlyn was great. That was in that show as well. So even in the show alone, there are some great villains that show up that I think would be really, like, a really quality standalone villain in an Arrow game. Yeah. So I think that could absolutely work.
And in terms of gameplay, too, I think that's always important to mention that, like, I really think there's a lot of different traversal stuff you could do in terms of gameplay. So I don't think everything should rip off Arkham, but if you want to have a grapnel system in some way, you could very easily have it be the arrow. You know, like how he'll like shoot an arrow up with a rope attached to it and he'll like propel up. You could do something like that, whether that's controlled directly by the player, like you aim it, because there are systems like that, like grappling systems, or grapnel hook systems.
Yes.
Like Lost Planet. It wasn't done perfectly, but the idea was you could aim it at something, and if it was close enough, you hit it, you zoom up to it. And then very easily you could have his combat be a mixture of melee and range. Maybe he's like, because he is good at hand-to-hand combat.
Yes.
Maybe he throws a few punches and kicks, smacks a guy over the head with the bow, and then turns around, quickly grabs an arrow, shoots someone in the face that's coming up at him. I don't know how you do that free flow, but it could be very interesting if you get it down.
Well, you've got a really cool option for long-range combat as well with the arrow. Like, there's a bunch of different arrows that you can use, and there's different ways that you can use those specific arrows in different combat situations. I think it'd be super fun. And one last thing that came to mind when you were talking about traversal was, did you ever play or watch like Sekiro at all?
Yeah.
So not necessarily exactly like this, but there's also like a kind of grapnel system that is used in that game that would be kind of interesting and maybe a little bit more realistic to the Arrow character, where he's not exactly high flying, but you're still getting around things relatively quickly and using elevated areas to get up to. So I think there's a lot of opportunities with an Arrow game.
For sure, that would be amazing to see. The next one we want to see is Red Hood. This one would be hard to do without making him a straight up villain, but he is an anti-hero, and I think that does count, just like you said too. He is a character that you definitely could play into the tragic past of, again, for a story. You could connect it to Batman. The one difficulty I see with this game is what universe this would be in. This would pretty much have to be, in my opinion, in a connected games universe with a Batman game out there, because if you don't do that, you run the risk of something like the Birds of Prey show. I don't know if you remember that back from the like early 2000s.
It just got one season, didn't it?
Well, yeah, but it's like flashing back to weird events that you never see because it's not connected to anything, and it's kind of like trying to reference a tragedy that you have no connection to. So I think that they would very much have to put this in an established universe. But once they did, I think it'd be very fascinating, because this would be a hero that kills, just straight up murders people. Who are bad guys. I mean, you know, maybe you don't just punch someone, you shoot them in the face. You know, this could very easily be a third-person shooter mixed with a combat action RPG.
Yes, you could go a lot darker with it and have a really dark tone with it, because there's not a ton of superhero games out there actually that kill. I don't really know of any that come to mind right away of superhero games that are straight up murder.
Most of the time it's just like, oh yeah, no, he lived. Like Spider-Man's one of the closest I can think of. You just chunk people off like an edge and they like zoom to the building.
The building or whatever, yes.
I guess Infamous, you do kill people.
Sure, I didn't even think about that.
Infamous, you kill people in both of those. They always have it coming, but you do. Or in all three of them. And also, I would argue you kill people in Superman Returns. If not, you're dead by the time you're done playing it.
That's a great point.
Yeah, but there are not many at all, especially not as an anti-hero, because even in the games where you do, they just act like you're the hero. I mean, like, if you're playing Infamous on the good karma playthrough and you murder a guy and he's a bad guy, no one's like, oh man, that was bad. They're like, yeah, cool.
Right.
Great job.
Yeah.
What a hero. You know?
Yeah,
and this would be something where, like, maybe the public's not for Red Hood. You know, like, maybe you have, like, people who are like, dude, this guy's awesome. Like, he's cleaning up our streets. This is amazing. Or like, he's a fascist. He's like taking the law into his own hands. He's murdering people. That's what you would have in real life. You know, if you had like, if all of a sudden in New York City, someone popped up who was like, let's just say murdering criminals, you know, left and right, there would be people saying, that's great. He's making our world a better place. And there'd be a ton of people saying, this is wrong. So you could have that conflict play out in the story where maybe the public isn't fully on Red Hood's side because of who he is.
And that affects the game, and it affects the environment, and it affects how different things change. And I think there's so many different story places that you could go with Red Hood too, which is super exciting. You could have him with relationships with Batman, with all the different Robins, with Alfred, with all of those things going on, if you wanted to. Or you could have it be completely separate and let him go off. And what would be interesting is if they kind of took a villain like Black Mask, that they did in Under the Red Hood, and that was like who Red Hood was trying to take out eventually and get up to.
Oh, like, so you had like a main villain that he was like working his way up to.
Yes.
You could like, kind of do that Shadow of Mordor style. I don't know if you'd put in like some kind of Nemesis system. The problem with it is he'd probably just murder everybody on the Nemesis system.
Right. Yeah.
So I don't think he'd ever have anyone on his side at all. But yeah, it's something like that where he's working his way towards an ultimate goal or ultimate endgame villain. So the next one we want to see is, it could be either one of these teams, Young Justice or Teen Titans. I think they count as the same entry. The reason being there is a lot of member overlap here.
Yes.
Young Justice as a show, even though Young Justice comics had existed for quite a while actually before the show, as a team, the Young Justice show kind of came in on the scene to replace Teen Titans in a lot of ways, a serious take on younger superheroes. This one would be hard to make though, I think. And the reason I say that is because it's easier in something like GTA. You have 3 characters. That's already pretty limited. I mean, but that was a big accomplishment. Switching between 3 characters throughout the whole story. They each have different stats. They each look different. But they're not running around with different superpowers that play completely differently, you know? This is something where you're asking a team like, hey, you're going to have to program in a minimum of 5 characters that are all very extremely playable. Whether that's, you'd need like Dick Grayson as Robin or Nightwing. You'd absolutely need that. You'd probably want Starfire at some point because there is crossover there on different incarnations of this. Miss Martian, maybe. Maybe you have someone like
Superboy, maybe.
Superboy, yeah. And that's hard in and of itself because he's so powerful. They already have that problem with the Superman game.
Right.
You know, so it's like you're asking them to do a lot with this. But if it's executed well, this would be like probably the most ambitious superhero game of all time.
If it's done well.
Yeah.
And that's what's challenging.
Or it could be garbage.
It could.
Because there is actually a Teen Titans like really bad game. And there's like a Young Justice like tie-in game that's like super mediocre.
Jeez.
Like from way back. And that's the thing, is like this would need to be done well. I don't know who would be up to the task of taking that on.
No, and that's, you could have it. So I know like Young Justice, I think their headquarters is in a mountain. I forget the name of it. But then there's also,
isn't it Mount Justice?
Maybe it is.
Which is a really lame name. Yeah, but I'm pretty sure it's Mount Justice.
I think you're right. And then the Titans Tower. So I mean, those are really cool like starting points as far as their bases. Maybe that's where you start out learning the characters, and you do like a training session there with each character and kind of get acclimated with how they work and how they play. And it'd be awesome if they had different stat trees that you worked up with each character. I feel like with a game like this, you would probably need a really long story to make it feel like everyone got their chance in the spotlight.
That is the problem, because if you just give someone one chapter, it works in Injustice.
Yes. You
give Green Lantern Green Lantern one chapter. You know what? You love Green Lantern. You're going to play as him in like 300 matches, either online or solo anyway. So it doesn't really matter. But in terms of like in a Young Justice or Teen Titans game, obviously it's not a competitive fighting game. It's going to be very different.
No, and you would need each character, I feel like, to have at least a good 5 to 10 hours to really enjoy it, and then maybe have like a giant culmination at the end for your climax.
It's like a bunch of mini games together, like mini video games.
Yes,
like shoved together. That's really the big problem with this, and to not to ignore Teen Titans, because I think they have the same exact problem.
Exactly.
You know, you're playing as Dick Grayson. That's going to be very different than playing as Raven
or Cyborg
or Beast Boy.
Yes,
and that's the other problem. And so what limitations do you put on? Is Beast Boy? If you playing as him, he can only turn into a dog, an elephant, and a giraffe.
Well, and that's the problem too. Is you wouldn't want to make it so that if, say, in Young Justice case, that Superboy is so overpowered that the player would only want to play as Superboy. Because it's like, well, it's the easiest way to get through the game, why wouldn't I just do that? So you want to make it so that each character has a purpose, and it's important to play as each one, and it's not just like, well, Superboy is the best, I'm just going to play as him. So you would need to navigate that too and make everything even as much as possible, while also still staying true to the characters. So that's a really, honestly, an incredibly challenging game to undertake. But if you did it and did it successfully, like you said, it'd be amazing, unbelievable.
And the final one we want to see, I feel like this is a predictable pick from you and me maybe, but come on, it's true. And no matter your hate or love for him, Superman is long overdue for a game. He should get at least one very good game before the end of time.
Yes.
Because he hasn't really. I mean, he's
by the way, 2020, we might be there, to be honest with you.
I know, right? Well, the thing, too, with Superman is he's gotten some fine games. I honestly don't think Superman Returns is the worst thing ever, but it's not good. It's very mediocre and unfinished. It seems like it feels like you're playing an alpha build of a final game.
Correct.
It shouldn't have been released to the public.
It'd be fun if you were it was one of your first games on the PS2 as a 12-year-old or something.
Yeah.
But now it's not. It doesn't hold up, I guess.
No, it doesn't at all. And there are some older Superman games that are fine, but mostly they've been fine at best and horrible at worst. And we want to see one that's really good or amazing. I mean, we've had these rumors forever about WB or Rocksteady or someone working on this project or passing up these projects over and over again because it's too hard or because they don't want to make it or because it didn't work out. And it's just been a big buzzkill over the years because it would be something different, And there are games that sort of do this. I think it's called Megaton Rainfall. That's a game that's like this idea. It was made by one guy, I believe, and it was sort of this idea of what a Superman game would be like. It's just this really overpowered guy, and it's a fun game. It's a game that's actually thought out. And there are other games, even Hulk Ultimate Destruction. I'm not saying it's amazing, but you can make a video game based off an overpowered character and make it fun. It's hard, but you can do it.
Well, it would be really challenging. I think that's what's hard is, do you want to start? I feel like there are a couple options. You could start at the very beginning when Superman is figuring out his powers and he's kind of getting acclimated. And you could, I think we just talked about it recently actually, was with Infamous Second Son. I just played through that. And one thing that came to mind when thinking about this was what if as you're playing, you get new superpowers as you're going? Superman realizes he can do this now. Not necessarily saying it's a great idea, but that's an option.
No, I think it is a good idea.
To work your way up to becoming fully Superman, and then it sets up a sequel potentially. And by the end of it, you're flying around as actual, full, ready to go Superman. Otherwise, you do kind of what Marvel Spider-Man did, where it's I've been Superman for so many years. I'm full. I'm in my prime right now, and I'm ready to go. So that is still a very tricky thing to navigate because you have to make a fantastic Metropolis. You have to have a quality villain that's actually a challenge to Superman. You have to make it so that flying is super fun and makes sense, and you feel like Superman. So it's a really challenging job. I get why it hasn't come out yet, but I feel like if you spent enough time and if you actually developed and put a lot of resources into making this game, that it would be incredible and it'd be super fun and it'd be what a lot of fans have wanted for a really long time because we've never really gotten a great Superman game, so it'd be cool to get one finally.
I completely agree. I think it's long overdue, and I think Smallville showed that idea, by the way, does work of this kid has some powers, he grows into them just like any young person would grow into their body, That's sort of how you do it if you want to start there. And I think that would be a very easy way, too, for a team to acclimate to, okay, by the end, you are Superman. How are we going to do this in another game where you start here? That could be a very easy way for them to build up to that and then be able to handle that in a sequel versus every other team that's just tried to jump in at Prime Superman. That's a concept that has not worked yet. So maybe starting somewhere else in the timeline is a good idea. So yeah, we'd love to see that. Any of these games we'd love to see. Let us know what you think in the comments down below. Would you like to see these games, or what superhero or even supervillain would you like to see a video game based around? Hey, be sure to check out the new Let's Play channel. We're doing a lot of fun stuff over there. We definitely appreciate your support and having fun over there and hanging out with us as we play through some games. The Discord, Patreon, Reddit, Instagram, Twitter, they're all linked down below, and we'll see you in the next one. Peace.